So I got to tell you, my sermon writing this week got all jacked up. It was terrible. I mean, in order to get my head wrapped around this week's message, I went to one of the holiest places I know, a place where I always get inspired, the McDonald's on 14 in Rochester, right? I order my large, refillable soft drink so that I can take up residency in the booth for the better part of the afternoon and do my sermon preparation. And there I sit with a giant TV screen on my left and a giant TV screen on my right. On both of them, they're playing 24 hours worth of news. On the one, it's Fox News. On the other, it's CNN. McDonald's is no dummy. They know that liberals and conservatives both want fries with their Big Mac, right? And so there I sit with the news on both sides of me, and here is the amazing thing, is that the images on the screen were the same. It was those kids. It's those kids. You know exactly what kids I'm talking about. It's those kids who are caught in this mess along our southern border. And both of them are there. And these kids, I can't get these kids out of my head. They're separated from their parents, and the conditions seem to be horrible. And I recognize the look on their face, because I've seen the look on their face. One time, and I mean just one time, I was less than 10 minutes late for picking Sam up from school. My phone was dead. I couldn't let him know I was on my way. I am rushing through traffic. I get pulled over because I'm speeding. I run a red light, and I'm 12 to 13 minutes late. And when I show up, my kid was terrified. He was in tears, he was broken down, and I had no way to tell him that I hadn't forgotten him. We were separated for just 13 to 14 minutes. And I never, ever want to see that look on my kid's face again. So I sat there in that McDonald's, and it was all I could do to not get in my car and just drive south. To get to those centers, to wipe away tears, to put Band-Aids on knees, and to storm up and down hallways until I could find a blanket, some medicine, a bowl of Cheerios, something, anything. I'm a dad. And all I wanted to do was protect those kids. So I was grateful that I could just start writing my sermon, so I could forget about it, so I could put it out of my mind. And yay, it was Christmas in July, so I could escape into the trees and into the music and into the fun. And there I was, sitting at my booth in the McDonald's, trying to get the images of those kids out of my mind. And I start reading the most familiar of all the Christmas stories, the one Linus just read for us. And here's what I realize. Mary and Joseph are having to make a tough decision to leave their home and migrate to a new community. Because of economic sources and forces, they simply felt like they could not stay, and they were leaving at what couldn't have been a worse time. She was pregnant. They weren't married. They were poor. And they were about to travel 90 miles. 90 miles to a place they didn't seem to know anybody, where they weren't sure where they would sleep, they weren't sure what they would find to eat, and they're about to have this baby. And when they get there, they're literally going door to door looking for a place to stay. And all I can do is see those kids. And I sit in the booth and I go, dang it, God, It's Christmas in July. What am I supposed to do with this? Christmas in July. When we set out 4 months ago to plan Christmas in July, we said, let's do something light this summer. Let's do something fun this summer. Let's do something that brings us all together this summer. What can be more fun than Christmas in July? And we said to ourselves, it'll be amazing to consider what these stories might mean when we tell them outside of the Christmas season. Darn it, God! Because when you tell this story outside of the Christmas season, suddenly you realize that Joseph and Mary, they're migrants. They're on the move. They feel forced to leave their home, hoping and praying that when they arrive in a new place, somebody, anybody might take them in. When we set out to plan Christmas in July 4 months ago, we hoped that we would realize that Christmas isn't just a season, that Christmas is a way of living every day in this world. So as much as I wanted, it became clear to me in that McDonald's that God wasn't going to let me off the hook. And so let me just say this. The next time I write a sermon, I'm going to Burger King. All right, I'm going to Wendy's. I'm going somewhere else. But seriously, let me say this. I am not an expert on the issues around our immigration policies and system. I'm not an expert at all. I got no easy answers. And I don't presume to tell you or tell us what we need to do about it. Secondly, the broken issues of our immigration system are not new. And they are not particular just to this president. Our system has been broke for decades. And it expands beyond just this administration and just this political moment. The kids on the border are failures of both parties to stand up and do the right thing when it comes to these kids. And if I could make any suggestion, if anyone would care to listen to a preacher from Royal Oak, I would tell them we have to move our thinking beyond just security and law enforcement and ask ourselves, what are the larger issues, economic and political, that make families like Mary and Joseph leave their homes against all odds, knowing what's facing them to come, and still risk to do it anyway? If we don't wrap our heads around what's happening in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, we can put all kinds of stuff in place and people are still going to come. But most importantly, what are we going to do for these kids? What are we going to do about these kids? I bet there isn't a person in here today who doesn't think we can't do better, who doesn't think we should do better. So if I'm going to expend any energy on this, it's going to be for these kids. Making sure they get reconnected with their families in the meantime, to make sure that they get cared for in a humane and dignified way. And if I'm going to ask you to expend any energy, I'm going to ask you to do it about these kids. Because there's one thing I know about this church, is you do just about anything for a kid. That's why I love Royal Oak First. Because in this church this morning, I get to talk to both Republicans and Democrats. In a world where we are separated this morning, we are worshiping together. And so this church can ask leaders of both parties to find a humanitarian solution to these kids. So after my McDonald's epiphany, the next day I got on the phone and I called my congressman. I called Andy Levin's office. And I spoke with Austin, his communication director, and I introduced myself as the pastor of Royal Oak First United Methodist Church, a church in his district that cares about kids, and I wanted to know what he was going to do to help us help these kids. And his staff person went on to tell me how concerned the congressman was and how he was doing everything he could to resist the current administration. I said, you can stop right there because I don't care how you're resisting this current administration. What I want to know is what you're doing about these kids. Well, the congressman is planning a trip down there. He said, I don't want a photo op. I don't know if you've heard about virtual signaling, but if you haven't, listen to Pastor Myra's sermon from last week. What I want to know is what you're going to do about these kids. And I said, until you can give me a better answer, expect a phone call from me once a week. Very nice, Pastor. It's good to meet you today. That's what we can do. Call the leaders of the party you generally vote for and tell them we can do better. We can do better. That's what can happen when it's Christmas in July. When I sat down to write this message months ago, when we planned it out, when I read that scripture, there was one line that stuck out to me. It said, "For unto us this day a child is born." This day is Christmas Day. This day is God with us day. This day is God for us day. But here's the deal. Christmas isn't about a certain day. The angel didn't say, behold, I tell you that December 25th will be Christmas Day from here on out. In fact, a little bit of Google research will tell you that Jesus wasn't even born in December. June 18th is really Christmas. Thank you, Google. So if it's not a certain day, then we have to ask what makes every day Christmas Day. What makes it possible for the child to be born? It's the innkeeper. The innkeeper is the real hero of Christmas. When Mary and Joseph are looking for a place to bring their child into the world, it's the innkeeper who makes the day Christmas Day. Want to make this day Christmas Day? Want to make every day Christmas Day? Then be the innkeeper. Be the welcome. Be the hospitality. Be the place and the people that assure that every child is seen as God's child and that every child has a safe place to come into this world. So I know what you're saying. It's great preaching, preacher. You've messed us all up. You poked us. You got us irritated. You got us worried. You got us concerned. It was supposed to be Christmas in July, and now we're all depressed. What are we supposed to do? I never try to do this without standing up here and telling you what to do. And I got to tell you, I spent the better part of this week trying to figure out something that I could tell you to do in response in order to help these kids. And I'll tell you, it was hard to figure out what to do. The first thing I did was go to the United Methodist website to see what the Methodists were doing, what the Methodists were recommending. And I found that the Methodists were recommending what the Methodists are always recommending. Give money, give health kits. And I was a little deflated. That's it? Money and soap? It didn't feel adequate. But I read down the page, and I learned that in the last 3 months, over 46,000 health kits have been distributed from 6 United Methodist churches along our southern border that do transitional ministry for all of those in their neighborhood who are living migratory lives. 46,000 health kits. And then suddenly I remembered my buddy John. John's one of our guests here at our bag lunch program. And a couple of winters ago, John needed a sleeping bag. And so I got him a sleeping bag. And while we were riding to the Army-Navy store, I said, John, can you help your pastor out? What do I need to know about what it means to live on the streets of Royal Oak? What's one thing that I need to know? What do I need to know in order to help you and help your brothers and sisters who call these streets their home? And he said, Pastor Jeff, there's two things that make all the difference in the world. A place to sleep and a place to shower. Because when I'm rested and when I'm clean, people treat me different. People treat me with dignity. People treat me with respect. You should see our men's bathroom here from 10:30 to 11:30 every day. We don't have a shower in there, but people are showering in there because they can walk out of here out into the world and people just treat them a little different. And so I'm glad that the United Methodist Church has given out health kits. Because as my brother John said, it makes a difference. So next week, it's Mission Envelope Week. And if you want to help your brother and sister United Methodist churches along our southern border hand out more health kits, next week in your green envelope, we're going to designate our offering to help them. But it doesn't get to those kids. And so I still wanted to know what I had to do to get to those kids. So I called my friend Jen Miller. I said, Jen, what are we going to do about these kids? She said, Jeff, there's no easy answer. But don't take your eyes off them. Don't take your eyes off them. Don't take your eyes off them. Thanks, Jen. Because you're right. Then I called my friend Paul Perez. Paul works for the United Methodist Church here in Michigan. He has been working with families navigating the immigration process for 20 years, long before it was ever the spotlight issue that it is today. And I said, Paul, I want to cut through it all. What can we do in Royal Oak, Michigan, in order to make a difference for these kids? I was not prepared for his answer. He said, sure. Encourage your folks to write letters. Encourage them to make calls. It's fine if they go to events, but here's what I need you to tell the people at Royal Oak First to do. I need you to tell the people at Royal Oak First to keep doing what they're doing right now. So the most important thing that you can do, Jeff, is to keep Royal Oak First doing what it's doing right now. I'm like, Paul, you better explain this to me because it feels like a cop-out. I said, Jeff, don't you get it? Royal Oak First is a border town. You're right on the border of city and suburb. You have a long history of providing comfort and care to those who live migratory lives, for those who walk across the border between city and suburb, many who don't know where they might stay or where their next meal comes from. Paul has seen your ministry, and he knows your commitment to the homeless of our community. He's witnessed how you welcome LGBTQ Christians who feel like refugees, who have no churches to find safe sanctuary in. And he said, how many kids did you have at VBS last week? Over 70? You guys know how to do kids. Don't take your eyes off the kids in your community, off the hungry and homeless in your community, off the spiritual refugees in your community. Because that's what it's going to take, is communities all across this nation and all around this world who see Christmas happening every day right in their midst. So among the many different ways that we are being called to act in this moment, I want to follow my colleague Paul's encouragement. I want to ask you to continue to be a blessing right here in Royal Oak. I'm going to ask us to double our efforts and to do it with more joy. So on your way home today, do me a favor. pick up a gift box, would you? A present. What's Christmas without a present? And this is our present to our community. It's a box. And it is an invitation to take it home and fill it. To fill it with personal care items, with deodorant and toothpaste and toothbrushes and feminine hygiene products and Band-Aids and the kinds of things that people could use. And then we're going to get them to the innkeepers of our community, the people who keep the safe places open, the Noah Project and the Brightmoor Free Store and Common Ground. And right here at Royal Oak First, pick up a box, fill it, bring it, put it under the tree. Let us be a blessing to our local community here. You know, there's this funny thing I realized. That when the three wise men came to visit Jesus, they brought three things. They brought gold, a little bit of money. They brought frankincense, which is deodorant. They brought myrrh, which is a fancy word for soap. And I got to tell you, every year when I read that story during Christmas, I think, what on earth are these three men bringing these ridiculous gifts to this newborn baby? If they were three wise women, the presents would have been a lot more appropriate. But then I realized that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of money, some deodorant, and some soap. Well, maybe it's the perfect gift for families who are just trying to find a safe place to rest, to regroup, and to wash some of the dust of their hard lives off of them. So Merry Christmas, my friends. And like I said, the next time I'm preaching, I'm going to Burger King. God bless you. Let's make this Christmas real for the kids and families of our community, our nation, and yes, God, our world.